Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Anna, and I'm a project associate at Clean Energy States Alliance. Our topic for today's webinar is state leadership in Solar+Storage, featuring Maryland and Oregon. Before we go any further, we have some quick webinar logistics that I want to go over. You'll notice that you have a webinar console, which should look like the picture that's shown on the screen here. You can use the console to adjust your audio. Either you can listen from your computer speakers or you can call in via telephone. All of our attendees are in listen-only mode. Near the bottom of the console, you'll see there's a box where you can write and submit your questions to us. We'll have two Q&A sessions, one after Maryland's presentation and another one after Oregon presents their work. Please submit your questions as soon as you think of them. Do not wait until the end. We'll get to as many questions as we can. If you would like to view the speaker's presentation slides in full screen, you have the option to minimize the webinar console. You just need to click on the orange arrow, which you'll see is circled on our sample webinar console on the screen here. Click that arrow again to expand the webinar console. One final note, the webinar is being recorded. We will send everyone who's attending today, everyone who signed up for this webinar, a copy of the webinar slides and the recording within about a week. We'll also post all of this information to our website, cesa.org/webinars. That's a good URL to know because that's also where we post all of our upcoming webinars and where you can RSVP to those. This webinar is being hosted by Clean Energy States Alliance, also known as CESA. CESA is a national membership organization. Most of our members are states, as you can see on this slide. We facilitate information sharing, host working groups, work on projects, and more. One of the things that CESA does with our members is the State Leadership and Clean Energy Awards. These are biennial awards. We announced the 2022 winners earlier this year. You can see the 6 winning organizations on your screen. Winners were selected by an independent panel of judges, and they were judged based on 4 parameters: leadership, innovation, cost effectiveness, and replicability. You can see the list on your screen of the 6 programs that won a 2022 State Leadership and Clean Energy Award. You can read these case studies of each of these programs on our website. Today's webinar is the 3rd and final webinar in our series highlighting the winning programs. The other 2 webinars are recorded and posted on our website, available for you to view. Now, without further ado, I will pass this over to my colleague, Todd Alinsky-Paul. He is a Senior Project Director here at Clean Energy States Alliance, and he will be moderating today's webinar.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Welcome to the webinar, everybody. As Anna said, this is the 3rd and final in this year's SLICE Award webinars, and that means that there are 2 previous ones that you can access on our website. We will be hearing today from the Maryland Energy Administration on their resilience programs and from Oregon Department of Energy on their solar and storage program. I'm going to briefly introduce the speakers, and then we'll hear from Maryland first. What I want to do is, after the Maryland presentation, we'll pause and address some questions about that program, and then we will go on to hear from Oregon, and then we will address questions from that program and any questions remaining that have to do with Maryland as well at that time. So please do type those questions in as they occur to you. Don't wait till the end. We will be pausing midway to address the first batch of questions. So speakers, we have today from Maryland, Brandon Bowser. He is the Energy Resilience Program Manager for the Maryland Energy Administration. He manages incentive programs that help Maryland organizations develop and install microgrids and other distributed energy systems, including the Resilient Maryland Planning Program, the Resilient Maryland Capital Development Program, the Combined Heat and Power Grant Program, and the Jane E. Lawton Conservation Loan Program. He also works with the policy team on distributed energy resources and non-wires alternatives. And interestingly, he serves as Maryland Energy Administration's Emergency Management Coordinator during natural disasters and other events that threaten the integrity of the state's power grid and fuel supplies. So I'm guessing that he knows something about resiliency needs in Maryland. We'll also hear from David Comas, Senior Energy Program Manager at the Maryland Energy Administration. David's focus areas include solar energy, energy storage, nuclear energy, and grid resilience. And prior to working at MEA, he helped the U.S. Department of Energy develop their first strategic sustainability performance plan and supported the Federal Energy Management Program in the areas of renewable energy and technology deployment. So let's go ahead and hear from them, and then we'll take some questions, and then I will introduce the Oregon Department of Energy team for the second presentation. I'll hand this over to Brandon and David.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right? I'm gonna take that as a yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. I see no news is good news. Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you to CISA for having us here today to talk about our resiliency suite of incentives. We've been really busy, especially over the past couple of years, developing these programs and furthering Maryland's energy goals, which have a strong focus on resilience, especially after the natural disasters and other various events that have threatened the power grid over the past few years. So our presentation today focuses on that suite of programs. Our presentation, as you see, is called Making a Resilient Maryland, which is what we've been hard at work doing. I'm here today with my colleague, David Comis, as Todd introduced earlier. And David and I both work in this suite of programs. This is our focus. And let's see. Oh, I do. Okay. I do have slide advancing ability. There we go. So the Maryland Energy Administration, we are the state energy office, of course, for the state of Maryland. Our mission is to promote affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy for the state of Maryland. And we do this in two primary ways. The first is in the programs division, where David and I work. We run a suite of energy incentive programs that help further energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, resilient energy technologies, and a few others that provide funds to Maryland organizations to install technologies to meet that goal. The second main function we do in this endeavor is on our policy arm, where we advise the governor and the General Assembly on energy matters. And right there you can see pictured our director, Mary Beth Tung. So just a little bit more deep dive of what I just talked about for MEA overall. Like I said, we offer a suite of incentives that are available to businesses, nonprofits, local governments, other state agencies actually, residents, critical infrastructure, manufacturing, a whole bunch of different types of organizations across the state for clean energy, energy efficiency, energy resilience. We've got financing programs as well as grant programs. And you can find more information. I'm assuming these slides will be made available after the webinar at those links below. We got business, state and local, transportation, and residential incentives to check out. So let's get to the core of what we're talking about today. That's going to be the resiliency incentives that we have historically run. They're going to take on a bit of a different shape in FY23, which I'll get to in just a moment. But historically speaking, this is our resiliency suite. We've got our Resilient Maryland Planning Program, Resilient Maryland Capital Development, which was actually run as a pilot last year, the Resiliency Hub Grant Program, which was founded and run by my colleague David, and our Combined Heat and Power Grant Program. A real quick rundown of all four of those. The planning side of Resilient Maryland, that's where Resilient Maryland started back in FY20. It is a program that is meant to provide planning and feasibility analysis grants to Maryland organizations so they can look at various configurations of microgrids and other DER systems for their facilities and operations. It's to help them get through that critical out of concept, closer to final engineering and shovel-ready status, sort of that make or break point in a project's life cycle in which you need to get critical stakeholder support and get affordable capital backing for these types of projects. And what Resilient Maryland Planning does is provide funds to make a set of 5 key deliverables that are meant to help that endeavor. Those are a comprehensive feasibility analysis, preliminary engineering data and system designs, a 20-year life cycle project pro forma, a greenhouse gas reduction potential report, and also what we call an implementation barriers report, which is simply a report that looks at potential logistical, geographical, or otherwise impeding barriers to getting the microgrid installed. So you can identify them and take a look at potential solutions for mitigation. So those 5 things together really make a nice package for critical stakeholders in a microgrid project to say, yes, I'm behind this. This assuages my concerns. It can really help attract affordable capital financing. The Resilient Maryland Capital Development, that one was actually created out of the success of Resilient Maryland Planning. We got a robust response to Resilient Maryland Planning over the past few years that we've run it across the state's entire economy. So we've got universities, we've got critical infrastructure like hospitals and wastewater treatment, we've got agricultural, multifamily housing, just a whole bunch of different industries and sectors applied for these planning grants. And because of that, we've got a lot of really key granular information about common configurations you see in sort of organization types. And some of those were, they got to a point throughout the Resilient Maryland analysis that they were ready to move forward to construction and installation. And so because of that, that gave precedent for us to create this capital development pilot program, which, as its name suggests, is sort of the equipment and installation incentive side of Resilient Maryland. So that one was run as a pilot for those who got through that preliminary analysis and are ready to go, put steel in the ground. We designed it as a pilot to give 1 to 3 grants. So it was a small targeted thing that first year. And the awardee that we selected was Frostburg State University for a microgrid that they're constructing on their campus. And we'll get into details about that project a little bit later in the presentation. David, I'll go ahead and let you talk about Resiliency Hubs on this slide because it's your program.
Actually, I'm 2 slides down. I'll talk about Resiliency Hubs. Oh, I'm sorry. Resiliency Hubs. They are not the same as emergency shelters. These are places where people in a neighborhood can get together and retain electricity during a power outage. It's designed to provide certain key functions that keep the area livable, and it also gives the local government time, sort of like a circuit breaker, so that neighborhoods don't become in extremis before the local government can provide emergency services. And we'll talk about those in a minute.
Thank you, David. And then last but certainly not least, you could probably call it our original resiliency program from way back in 2015, the Combined Heat and Power Grant Program. And as its name suggests, it provides equipment and installation incentive funds for organizations to install CHP systems in their facilities. So that black start and islanding are core to these systems. So that grant sort of helps offset that additional cost for those technologies to make a CHP not only grid parallel, but be able to start back up and operate to supply power to critical loads throughout an outage situation. And that one, like I said, we started that one in FY15, and we're actually about to close FY23. Next week is the deadline. Okay. And as mentioned, these are the Resilient Maryland and Resiliency Hubs. Those are the programs that received the 2022 CISA Slice Award. So we thank you again, CISA, for your recognition. It's we're really proud that the program got to where it was. And now we're going to get into a little bit more information on the mechanics of the program and how we got here. So I will go ahead and just being a little slow. So David, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some legislation that recently passed this legislative session, which codified the Resiliency Hubs program.
Right, the Resiliency Hubs program has been around since 2019, and it ran through 2019. We had no awards in 2020. We had awards in 2021. And in 2022, and lo and behold, during the 2022 session, one of the delegates to our General Assembly felt the program was sufficiently valuable and well put together, and decided to codify it into a law. So now by law, we are required to run this program and offer a minimum of $500,000 per year to help provide resiliency hubs. Next slide.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about what a resiliency hub is required to do. The money comes from a tier 1 renewables, which means a renewable source of energy. So it could be solar, it could be wind, but the money comes from the solar program. So it is solar plus energy storage for the resiliency hubs. The hub must be able to island from the grid, since the whole point of the hub is to be able to provide a reliable source of energy when the grid is down. It must have a 50% probability of lasting 3 continuous days at whatever the planned loading was. When we initially started the program in 2019, it was 50% probability for 5 continuous days. That tended to cause the programs to be very expensive. We backed it off to 3 days, also looking at the data for energy outages. We felt 3 days was sufficient to handle most of the outages, and it would give local government enough time to clear the roads and streets and to help the truly critical infrastructure before it started coming into the neighborhoods to go provide emergency support there. So this was,
Sorry.
That's right.
There you go.
So that was the intention. Now, how do you determine a 50% probability? There is software out there called solarresilient.org. It runs off of data from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It was developed by a private company in Southern California, and it is currently available through a website that is run by the city of San Francisco. You can also get the same data from REOP Lite from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, but that's a whole lot harder to go do. Solarresilient.org gives you a very good first look at sizing of the solar panels and the energy storage system. Since the money comes from a fund that is designed only for renewable energy, I cannot pay for backup diesel generators. However, if the system is going to run as a microgrid, or if it's going to have an emergency diesel generator, we provide enough money to go actually put the switch gear in that would allow the backup generator to hook into the system. But that's all. We require both the site owner and the site operator and the system owner. So they may all be the same person, but in most cases, there are 3 totally different groups. We require all of them to guarantee that they will maintain the site as a resiliency hub for at least 5 years. Okay. Part of the impetus for this program was a derecho that came through our area in 2013. For those that have never heard of a derecho, just consider a line of thunderstorms that are 300 miles long that move somewhere between 50 and 70 miles an hour that cause hurricane force winds, straight line winds across the surface. And this whole line of clouds moves at 50 to 70 miles an hour. Ours started in Chicago and ended up in the Atlantic Ocean. And it causes massive destruction in the wake, mostly electrical wires and a lot of downed trees, making transportation very difficult and a lot of danger due to downed wires. As such, the resiliency hubs were mandated to only be to serve a community that was within walking distance, under the assumption that the roads would be would be out of service for some period of time. The Resiliency Hub is required to go provide enough lighting for safety that's both inside the building and outside the building, and security so that it's a safe place to be. It must have enough plug load capability to charge cell phones, small laptops. I'm sure a Game Boy or two is going to make it into there. And starting in 2021, the Maryland Department of Health gave me a call and said, hey, how about ensuring that you have enough power for durable medical equipment, such as portable dialysis machines and the oxygen concentrators that people use? And the reason for that is that most of the time when the power goes out, people that are dependent on these machines, the first thing they do is they get in their car and they go down to the local hospital and end up in the emergency room. Not because they need emergency capability, they need the electricity. Causes the emergency room to become totally overcrowded with people that don't need the services. So the thought was, if you can have these resiliency hubs where people can go and plug in these machines, it will keep them out of the emergency rooms, and that's a good thing. Also, for those that followed the devastation to Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria, one of the biggest issues with when they got small solar and batteries back to the small villages, the big thing was CPAP machines, because for people who can't sleep without massive events at night, the CPAP was most important, and that is a piece of durable medical equipment. Okay, it must have a small refrigerator. It's not for food, but it's for the temperature sensitive medications. It was felt that it was unfair to have people who were poor or low and moderate income to lose large value medications like insulin because they lost refrigeration. So this is a place where you can come get your temperature, your medications refrigerated. Also, the thought was for nursing mothers that would need to go save some mother's milk for the baby. This was also considered to be unnecessary, but it's not for food. And it must have enough heating and cooling capability to keep people in a safe and healthy condition, which is another way of saying keep them out of the emergency room. And so operationally, we say try and keep it between 65 and 78 degrees. 65, you can wear a sweater. 78, you can use a fan. And it turns out this is the major electrical load, and it causes the largest problems when designing a resiliency hub, specifically many buildings that would be used for resiliency hubs have the large rooftop heating and cooling systems, and it may require, a 36 kilowatt starting surge, which would totally overwhelm the inverter on a resiliency hub. So potentially you have to also have window air conditioners that you can pop into a window when the time comes, and the portable 1.5 kilowatt heaters in order to go keep the space warm enough. So these were the issues on a resiliency hub. They were designed, the hub is designed to go work in low and moderate income communities, specifically places where people may not have cars to be able to go to another place, and they would not have the money to put in their own solar and energy storage system. So the object was to go keep a place where they could do it. Now, the question is, where do these things go? And when I developed the program, my answer was, I haven't a clue, nor do I have the full idea of where they might go. I'll give you some examples. Social rooms for churches, community rooms in high-rise apartments. I had one person who gave me a call and wanted to put it in a laundromat. There were a couple of reasons that actually made some sense. soup kitchens. And so there are many, many other, actually I have one in a middle school. One is in a community center. So I didn't want to go specify buildings. I wanted the developers to go tell me where it made sense, and that would do it. We provide an incentive of $3,000 per kilowatt of solar that is required. So just to give an example, if you had a 13 kilowatt continuous load over the 3 days, you would need about 130 kilowatts of solar and about 320 kilowatt hours of battery storage. So 130 kilowatts of solar times 3,000, that's a $390,000 grant to go put in such a system. Now that provides some money for the solar, some for the battery, some for the rewiring that would be required, some for the new meter, some for the microgrid controller if you're doing that. All of that has to come out of the $3,000. A $3,000 per kilowatt grant pays for about 50% of the total cost of the solar. I do not have any requirements on what they do with their solar energy or with their battery in between grid outages. So they also benefit from the solar on their energy bill and from battery as far as if they have a demand charge, it can help them with that. I do have a requirement that says before any event that is likely to go cause a grid outage, that the battery system or the energy storage system must be charged to at least 90%. Now in Maryland, that could, in the summer, that's like the daily afternoon thunderstorm. In the winter, it's whenever you have icing events, major snowstorms, derechos coming. So there is some the constraints on the ability to do a long-term contract to go use the solar and energy storage outside of the resiliency function. But there are great advantages. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brandon.
Thank you, David. So now looking forward, based on the successes of these programs over the past few years, they all have similar goals. And so given where we were and where we've come, we made the decision in FY23 to combine them into what we're calling the Resilient Maryland platform. So that's going to integrate the planning program, the capital development program, as well as the Resiliency Hub Grant Program all into one. And so essentially the three separate programs from before are now becoming areas of interest under the FY23 program. And we actually launched that program a few weeks ago. November 16th was the first day we had it open. And we're taking applications now. That is a competitive program across all three AOIs. And those applications are going to be due on Thursday, January 26th. Right now, we're not looking at extending the deadline. We might revisit that in the future, depending on the demand that we get as we get closer to that. But right now, please consider the 26th the deadline. And so it's the first time that MEA is sort of running a platform approach like this with programs, and Resilient Maryland seemed like the right one because you had three very closely related programs that were like right there. So it's a trial run for this type of concept, and if it proves successful, which we are confident that it will, you'll probably see a lot more of MEA's programs take this type of approach from a platform standpoint. So efficiency, solar, what you name it, we're trying to move into a streamlined direction to make things easier for our administrative purposes, but as well as for the applicant's experience. Just because these energy projects are becoming more and more intertwined. You're not just doing one-off things like you used to do. A lot of the times now when you're looking at an energy capital project, you're looking at doing efficiency, renewables, and storage / resiliency all at once. So we're trying to make sure that our suite keeps up with that industry development. So let's get to the fun part of this, and that's we selected 3 spotlight projects for you today of systems that we have funded, both design and installation at the same time, or not at the same time, design first, followed by installation. Those are, as I mentioned earlier, Frostburg State University. Then we'll talk a little bit about groundswell, and we'll wrap things up with talking about the Housing Initiative Partnership in Prince George's County. But first, let's take a trip out to Western Maryland. Frostburg State University, they are in the process of implementing a campus microgrid. They were one of our very first Resilient Maryland awardees way back in fiscal year 2020. And we gave them that money to produce all of those 5 deliverables that I mentioned earlier in the call. And the design that they came up with was a 3 megawatt solar PV, 1 megawatt fuel cell CHP, and advanced thermal management system, which includes absorption chilling and hot and chilled water storage and dispatch. So what they'll use that for, obviously during the summertime, the absorption chilling will be used for, space conditioning purposes, but also some of that heat energy, both in the summer and winter time, will be used to actually heat their pool, like their indoor pool on campus. So we thought that was a really neat application of the waste heat from the fuel cell system. So they got the $100,000 from Resilient Maryland Planning to conduct this analysis. And then they got a $750,000 Resilient Maryland Capital Development Grant just this past fiscal year to help with the construction and equipment costs. The microgrid itself will safeguard critical campus loads, and its Quartz Physical Education Center on the campus is actually going to become an officially Maryland Department of Emergency Management designated emergency shelter for not only the students, but the city of Frostburg. And the microgrid will provide the resilient power source to give that site power during emergency situations where the shelter needs to be activated. And one additional really interesting thing that came out of this project, which we admittedly did not foresee when we first made the initial award back in FY20, was the creation of workforce development and student credentialing opportunities from this. So what Frostburg is doing is they're creating clean energy degree and certification programs in which they will allow student interns, and if they're going through like a certification program, whatever it might be, to have an active involvement in this microgrid project. So it's not all theoretical. Like the work that these students are doing in furthering their education is actually contributing to the development of this real steel in the ground microgrid. And that model was highly popular when they first announced that they were doing this. All of the surrounding community colleges around FSU are looking to adopt this model, as well as the University of Maryland and Bowie State University. So it just sort of took the region by storm, which is nice to see the Western Maryland extraction economy turning into sort of a hub of clean energy workforce development. And we can thank Frostburg for that. David, I'll let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about groundswell.
Groundswell, first of all, let's just say this is really Baltimore. Baltimore has an Office of Sustainability, and they have had resiliency hubs for a while, but these resiliency hubs are places where they would have equipment like things to go cut up trees that have fallen down, or shovels to help dig out stuff, or emergency type stuff, but none of it dealt with electricity. In 2021, Groundswell received a Resilient Maryland grant to actually look at, well, what started with 40 viable sites across Baltimore. We reduced it down to 26, for which they would look at the feasibility of putting in a solar plus energy storage system to form resiliency hubs. It was done in consonance with the city of Baltimore and with the local organizations who they were responsible for talking to determine their interest in doing that. The next year, we received 3 grant requests through Groundswell, and trying to develop 3 resiliency hubs. 2 were at churches, and 1 was at, I'm going to call it a food kitchen. It was the City of Refuge in Baltimore. All of these were in Baltimore. They all had the same team to put them together, and they're currently in the process of completing their design and should be about ready to start construction soon. They have the support of the city of Baltimore. They have our grant, and they are mission driven. Now, having said that, this was an interesting concept of the city of Baltimore City, by the way, is the equivalent of a county. So we have 23 counties plus Baltimore City. But so treat them as a county. The thought of working with the county to go identify resiliency hubs, do major study to determine where are the appropriate sites and buildings to put in resiliency hubs, and then let's see if we can find funding to do that, was an interesting idea. And Groundswell submitted an application under the U.S. Department of Energy's RACER program, the Renewables Advancing Community Energy Resilience Grant Program, to try and replicate what they had done in Baltimore, to do it in Montgomery County. Now, Baltimore is an urban city. Montgomery County has portions of city and portions of suburbs, and then portions that are very rural. So it was, I want to say, a step down county. And based on what they learned in Montgomery County, they would then try and apply it in a county on the eastern shore, which has very little city and almost all rural. So the object was of this grant to go use this concept that they are developing for resiliency hubs with the city of Baltimore and learn lessons that would apply across multiple different types of counties. So it was a major coup when they were selected about a month ago, and we'll see what they develop. Brandon, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, David. And I will mention that in addition to the RACER grant, that Groundswell actually did receive another Resilient Maryland Planning grant from MEA for their Montgomery County analysis. So they're underway right now, hard at work on that. From the state of their monthly reports, they are very much hitting the ground running. So I can't wait to see what comes out of that one as well. And we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I know we're coming up on time, but the last one that we wanted to mention, this is a really cool one. The Housing Initiative Partnership. This is in Fairmount Heights, Maryland, which is in a location in Prince George's County, just outside of Washington, D.C. The Housing Initiative Partnership, they are a Prince George's County-based nonprofit housing developer. They're a neighborhood revitalizer. They also provide financial consulting services to Marylanders who are, they disproportionately experience vulnerabilities and challenges. They initially received almost $80,000 FY20 Resilient Maryland grant, so they were another one of our inaugural year awardees to conduct feasibility analysis and pre-construction planning for this block of homes. So it's a block of 6 homes. They're going to be new construction net zero energy homes, and there's going to be a microgrid that is going to power these homes and provide resilient energy during outage situations. The microgrid itself will consist of solar PV arrays installed on each home, and they'll also have front of the meter. So this is a front of the meter technology, a combination microgrid control module and energy storage. Each home will have one of these in front of its meter, and there will also be a centralized large shared battery bank within that little community that they can all draw from as well. The neat thing about this is that the utility was actually involved from day one. So they've been working with the Housing Initiative Partnership and some technology partners to get this concept moving. The homes will be actually able to share energy between each other as needed, during outage situations or during blue sky conditions when the microgrid, logic controller is making the most optimal decisions for energy consumption and storage and allocation. So you've got this fluid resilience component. So you're taking resilience to the next level and saying, all right, well, My neighbor might have a huge need for energy right now, but I might not. So the system can pull from my little box that's in front of my house and send to them, and vice versa. So that was a really neat concept that we thought was incredibly innovative. And another thing that this project is going to look at is the potential for DC appliances to be integrated. There's still going to be AC and DC appliances in the home, but they're going to try some DC appliances out on dedicated DC circuits inside the microgrid, with the idea being the fewer conversions you send the electricity to, the more efficient it becomes. So that was another really innovative part of the project that we saw value in. And because of that, they were actually awarded a $200,000, what we call a special innovation grant in FY21 to help pay for the equipment and installation costs. So this kind of predated the Resilient Maryland Capital Development Program, but because of the innovative nature of this project, we were able to issue a special innovation award. MEA has the power to do that here and there when we have the funding capability. It's not a guarantee, but when the right conditions are in place and you've got an innovative project, it's something we actually do have the authority to do. And this one is currently under construction in Fairmount Heights. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap things up, and we welcome any questions that you might have for us.
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you. This has been quite an informative presentation. I want to remind everybody, this is not the end. We have another presentation to come in a moment on Oregon's SLICE award-winning program on solar and energy storage. But before we do that, we do have a few questions for the team from Maryland Energy Administration. And let's try to hit these fairly quickly. One is, can a project qualify for more than one MEA resiliency incentive program?
It depends. So our rule generally when it comes to funding projects is that you can't double dip on a single system or a single project. What I mean by that is, like, say that you have a microgrid that you're putting a CHP system into along with solar PV and battery storage. Like, you couldn't get a Resilient Maryland Capital Development Grant, or I guess an AOI2 microgrid capital under the new model, as well as a CHP grant for the same CHP system. So it's either one or the other one. What you can do, however, is that you can get a Resilient Maryland Planning Grant to do the planning analysis on it. And then you can get a capital development grant to help pay for the equipment and installation. The reason why is because they're two separate projects. Like, the first project is the design and analysis. The second project is the equipment and installation. But you can't get two capital grants from two programs for the same system, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. That makes sense. Here's somebody is saying, I would like to hear more information about the siting of the resiliency hubs from Maryland. I understand these are separate from emergency shelters, but how did Maryland ensure these would be utilized? How did Maryland justify siting in a laundromat, for example?
The laundromat never came about. One of the requirements on the Resiliency Hub is that the Resiliency Hub be sent through the county or city's Office of Emergency Management, or whatever it's called in the county, and they get veto power. So if somebody wanted to put it within the 50-year floodplain, with rising sea levels in Chesapeake Bay, that might not be a great idea. And the city of Baltimore, Baltimore County would say no. So they get a veto on this. As far as the siting, one of the requirements of the application is that they have to give me a study showing the makeup of the people that would use the site, meaning they have to show low and moderate income people live within walking distance. They also have to give justification for why the building and/or why the rooms within the building were selected. So this all comes into the application process, and it's fairly, I want to say it's fairly detailed. Having said that, this tends not to be the thing that hangs people up. It's trying to determine how much energy the Resiliency Hub needs in order to go last the 3 days, that causes people problems. I don't see that it is, but it's what's been the problem, and we normally have to give them some technical assistance for making assumptions. Having said that, some of the resiliency hubs are built larger than what is required. For example, I mentioned the one was at a school. It's actually in the cafeteria of the school. In this case, the rooftop unit was sized properly so that they could run it on the system that they have. The school had already wanted to put in a 300 kilowatt system, but they needed 130 kilowatts for the resiliency hub. So the payment, the grant was based on 130, but they were putting in a 300 kilowatt system. Putting in a 300 kilowatt system reduced the actual size of the battery that was required. So they gained from that. Since the question was fairly large, I'm not sure if I answered the intent of the question or not.
Well, let's assume that you did, and go, because we have a couple other questions, and then we need to leave some time for the folks from Oregon. Somebody is asking how the program is paid for, and since you guys are talking about more than one program, I don't know which one they're referring to, so let's speak to all of them. How are these programs paid for?
They come from multiple funding sources, but mainly our Strategic Energy Investment Fund. And MEA, we are the statutory administrator of this fund, and it receives the Maryland's proceeds from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. So that's the primary source of funds, but some of the funds also come from alternative compliance payments. So it's sort of a mix, but generally speaking, those are the two main funding sources that we see.
Okay, and alternative compliance payments, I'm assuming that means these are payments paid by utilities that are paid in lieu of meeting a renewable energy target. Is that correct?
Yeah, renewable energy credit or certificate, yes.
Yeah, that's okay. And this final question is actually for me. I was curious as to whether the microgrids / resiliency hubs of various types are able to provide other services that can be monetized. For example, grid services or bidding into wholesale energy markets or participating in utility demand response programs or that sort of thing.
Brendan, let me lead off with that one.
Sure, go ahead.
The 3 resiliency hubs in Baltimore City, the developers are designing them in a manner such that they can take the 3 batteries and tie them together and bid them into the regulation market. Having said that, there are 2 problems with that. Number one, there is no tariff that would allow them to do that. So at this point, they're stopped. And number 2, that little pesky thing that said that the batteries have to be charged up to 90% before every event that is likely to cause an outage, which would get in the way of doing a long-term contract for resilient services. But no, we do not prevent them from monetizing the services in another manner as long as they can meet all the requirements. Brandon, did you have anything else?
Just a little bit to add on to that, like when it comes to like the microgrid side of things, like it's a microgrid, but not necessarily a resiliency hub, like what Frostburg's doing, for example, like a microgrid of that scale. Yes, I absolutely want to see you take advantage of as many, financial benefit streams as you can, if you will. Like I want to see you participate in demand response programs. I want to see you participate in wholesale grid services, or the wholesale grid markets, I mean. But yeah, so whatever you can factor in, because really, I mean, the resiliency part of it, yes, it's a huge value proposition driver, but a lot of these things, you're doing it not only for the resiliency, but you're doing it to be more sustainable and to optimize your energy O&M costs at the end of the day. My background is energy finance, so that's where I get really nerdy here. But yeah, so we definitely encourage that with the microgrid side.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you again, both of you, for your presentations. We're going to go and On to the Oregon Department of Energy. Please don't go away. You can turn off your webcams, but we'll be asking you to come back at the end because we may have additional questions for you. So while we're getting our next two panelists up and running, I will do brief introductions for them. We're going to hear from Pandyan Krishnaswamy. He is an Energy Incentives Manager at Oregon Department of Energy. He manages the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program, as well as the Energy Efficient Wildfire Rebuilding Incentive Program, and the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program, and the Heat Pump Incentive Programs. Quite busy, obviously, with all these programs. And then we're also hearing today from James Kogel, also at Oregon DOE. He's a policy analyst working across the agency's incentive programs. Welcome to you both. I will hand the mic over to you to present your program.
Thanks, Todd. Good afternoon. My name is Pandyan Krishnaswamy. Like Todd said, I'm managing quite a few programs at Oregon Department of Energy, and one of them is the Oregon Solar+Storage Rebate Program. On behalf of the program team and the Oregon Department of Energy, I thank CISA for the award and the recognition. Todd talked about a couple of other programs. One of them is the Energy Efficient Wildfire Rebuilding Program. In year 2020, Oregon faced severe wildfire, and many homeowners lost their homes, including manufactured home parks. So that program provides incentives for them to rebuild their homes with energy efficiency. The Community Renewable Energy Grant Program provides grants for local governments like cities and counties and schools and fire departments to build renewable and resilient systems. And the last two programs we are working on standing up is for heat pump incentives. It provides incentives for building owners and homeowners, renters to install heat pumps in their residential places. With those programs, we are a little bit busy in the last 2 years. I'm inviting James to introduce himself and present information on the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program. James.
Thanks, Pandyan. My name is James Kogel, and I'm a policy analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. I work across several of the agency's incentive programs you just heard about, aimed at increasing energy efficiency or the installation of renewable energy. So before we launch into our Solar+Storage Rebate Program, let me introduce you to the Oregon Department of Energy. Our agency helps Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Also on this slide are the 5 broad focus areas of our work, including energy programs and activities like the Oregon Solar+Storage Rebate Program. The Oregon Solar+Storage Rebate Program was established by the Oregon Department of Energy at the direction of House Bill 2618, passed by the Oregon State Legislature in 2019. The program advances Oregon energy policy by increasing renewable energy production, strengthening energy resilience through installed battery storage, and supporting clean energy jobs through the Oregon solar installer industry. The program aims to incentivize the purchase and installation of solar electric systems and paired solar and storage systems. Another priority of the program is to expand access to renewable energy for people in Oregon with low and moderate incomes. This is achieved through higher dollar per watt rates for calculating incentives, a higher percentage of the net cost of the project that can be funded, and a budget reservation of at least 25% per year reserved for low or moderate income residential customers or low income service providers. The Oregon Department of Energy began public engagement to inform the program's draft rules in September 2019, and on January 1st, 2020, began enrolling contractors for the program. The initial funding allocation for the program was $2 million, and the release of funding was staggered to assist the agency in meeting its requirement that at least 25% of the funds benefit low and moderate income participants. Due to the success of the program, an additional $15 million was appropriated by the Oregon legislature for the program over 2 legislative sessions. As of November, just over $4 million remained in the program budget. So the program provides rebates in order to reduce the upfront cost to the customer for the purchase and installation of the system. The program requires evidence that the full amount of the rebate is passed on to the customer. Only approved contractors are able to access the reservation system and submit rebate reservation requests. A couple of different pathways to becoming an approved contractor have been established, but they all require verification by the program. We have tried to simplify this by allowing a contractor's presence on an approved list of contractors from electric utilities or the Energy Trust of Oregon as one of the program requirements. For residences, the system must be installed on real property in Oregon, and for residential customers, the customer must be the owner-occupant of the residence. Low-income service providers are also eligible. These are non-residential customers and include specific affordable housing, the owners of systems that benefit affordable housing, community service organizations who serve low or moderate income individuals, or tribal or local government entities providing social services to low or moderate income individuals, or who provide shelter, emergency shelter or communications in disaster situations. Examples of organizations that have received funding include Habitat for Humanity chapters, Boys and Girls Club chapters, and affordable housing organizations. Since the program was established, the agency has made only minor amendments to the program rules to improve the reach and effectiveness of the program, as well as to update procedures. So how it works, the customers go directly through approved contractors. The contractor then submits a request for a reservation in the online rebate reservation system before beginning the work. They're able to submit any necessary paperwork in the system and provide details of the proposed system. The agency uses Power Clerk from Clean Power Research to collect and process the rebate requests. The program then reviews the request to ensure the proposed system is eligible, and if accepted, reserve the rebate amount. Once the system installation is complete, the contractors can request the rebate amount by logging back into the online rebate system and providing any additional necessary information. The rebate request is then reviewed to ensure that the installed system is eligible. If approved, the rebate is paid to the contractor. The program has established different rates for projects for income restricted customers, non-income restricted customers, and low-income service providers. This table provides kind of an overview of those. Low or moderate income can be determined in a number of different ways, demonstrating eligibility for programs such as SNAP or Medicaid, demonstrating eligibility under energy or weatherization assistance programs. And for this, we have collaborated with Oregon Housing and Community Services, the state agency who operates the federally funded low-income home energy assistance program and weatherization assistance programs, when establishing rules to streamline ways for households to demonstrate eligibility for the higher rebate amount. Submitting the most recent year's tax transcript that demonstrates household income is less than or equal to 100% of the state median income is also an additional way that people can demonstrate they meet those low or moderate income requirements. And program participants can stack incentives. So if they're eligible for Energy Trust of Oregon or other utility level incentives, they're able to save even more for the system. Since 2020, the program has reserved funding for more than 3,600 projects in 32 of Oregon's 36 counties, supporting over $138 million of investment in clean energy. Currently, the program has 66 approved contractors who can apply for rebates. In terms of achieving our goals for low or moderate income projects, in the initial funding allocation for the program, the Oregon Department of Energy exceeded its program goal and allocated nearly half of the rebate dollars to low and moderate income Oregonians and low income service providers. In 2001, this trend continued and 37% of the program committed funding was for low or moderate income residential customers or low income service providers, and that exceeds that initial 25% required reservation. In the past 2 years alone, Oregon has experienced devastating flooding, ice storms, extreme heat, and wildfires. This program shows the state's leadership in supporting the transition to cleaner energy options like renewable solar. In addition to solar displacing carbon from other electricity sources to reduce Oregon's contribution to climate change. The storage component of the program also moves Oregon toward adapting to the climate change that is already here by providing energy resilience in the form of battery storage. Strengthening the resilience of Oregon's energy sector and encouraging microgrid technology like Solar+Storage will also help the state prepare for other emergencies that could create long-term power disruptions. While providing the rebates through contractors reduces the upfront cost to consumers and allows the program to reach more lower income Oregonians who may not have tax liability to benefit from a tax credit program, it does reduce the connection to the customer. The Oregon Department of Energy continues to review and improve the ways it connects directly with the beneficiaries of the program in order to assess who is accessing the program and to assist the agency in reviewing the program's effectiveness in serving all Oregonians. So thank you for taking the time to listen today. You can find more information about the program on the agency's website, and I've also included the program's email contact information if you have questions after today, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have about the program.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentations. And if we can get the Maryland team to come back on screen, we do have some questions for the Oregon presenters, and we are continuing to get questions. If you have questions, if you're listening and you thought of something that you wanted to ask either of these teams of presenters, please go ahead and type those in, and we do have some time. We'll try to get to those. So again, I want to congratulate both of you on your programs. Here are a couple of questions for the team from Oregon. First off, somebody wants to know, how are contractors approved and what are the criteria used to base approval on?
James, I'll start and then you can join. All right. So in the once the statute got passed, we wrote administrative rules defining contractor eligibility. I'll walk you through a couple of eligibility criteria. One, the contractor either holds or an individual in their organization who's holding the solar panel installation professional certification. It's called PVIP. Or the contractor employs a PV installer specialist certified by national organizations. The contractor also needs to be recognized as an ally in a private organization in Oregon called the Energy Trust of Oregon. So they should be in good standing as a contractor in that organization. They should also hold what we call as certified contractor in Oregon. They should hold that license. they should also hold bond or insurance in their profession, part of their profession. So they need to provide all this information to us, and then we verify it. And in our public-facing program website, we list the contractors who we approved as eligible contractors. James, you want to add anything?
No, yeah, so as well as Energy Trust of Oregon, we also use the electric utilities often run programs, and so they sometimes have a list of approved contractors as well. So we utilize those as well.
Okay, great. We have a question from somebody. This is more of a request, actually. It says, Oregon Department of Energy has published data on each grant awarded under the Solar+Storage rebate program on data.oregon.gov. However, this data set does not report on the energy and power capacity of the batteries that were installed. Could Oregon DOE please update this data set to include these variables? One additional variable that would be helpful would be the date of installation or interconnection. Obviously, you can't tell us all of this information verbally. It's just simply a request to update a data set. But do you have any comments on that before I go on to the next question?
Thanks for asking this information. Our frequency is once in a year we will update this data set. So the next update happens in January. We'll look into this and see if we can add this information.
Okay, and I should mention that without identifying it, the person who asked the question, I believe, is from one of the national laboratories. So there may be some, if you want afterwards, we can give you the information on who that was so you can maybe contact them if you'd like to. Okay, next question. Can a user or vendor apply for grant money in Oregon to pay for the homeowner's participation in a community solar project? Assuming that would mean community solar in the traditional sense of you have a large central solar installation and you're allowing either residential or sometimes commercial customers to buy shares essentially in that solar facility, even though it is not physically located on their property, and they can thereby share in the net metering proceeds or whatever other benefits there are.
Right. Let me make sure that I get the question right. Currently, in the other program called the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program, where it's a competitive application process, community solar projects, a couple of those projects did get award on that project, and they are working on signing an agreement, performance agreement with us. So yes, there's a route for community solar projects to get grants in Oregon. Does that clarify? Did I get the question right?
I think you're sort of approaching it. I think that, well, let me just go back to the question. What it says is, can a user or vendor apply for grant money in Oregon to pay for the homeowner's participation in a community solar project?
Currently, I believe it's no. James, is there a...
Yeah, so this program, the solar system or the solar storage system can be part of a larger system that shares components like racking or anything. But Panion's right in that there's a different program, a Community Renewable Energy Grant Program, where the owners or the city or a public body who's partnering with maybe a community solar program is maybe able to apply for a project under that grant program. That's obviously a different requirements with that.
Okay, so here's a question from me. does this program in Oregon require resilience? In other words, I know that resilience is a big motivator, but is it a requirement? And if so, are there specific resilience requirements such as duration for qualifying systems?
Right. So in the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program, there's two distinct eligibility. One, it can be just solar, and those programs are eligible, or the project has to have solar and storage. If it has both components together, then it becomes eligible. I hope that clears the first part of the question.
Okay, but does it require that it be islandable for resilience purposes, or is it sufficient to just have solar and storage? Because you would have to have islanding switches to be able to have a resilience benefit as well, and that's an additional piece of equipment.
Correct. So that's not a requirement. They can have it, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, great.
We do have a requirement about, in terms of the size, the ratio. So for like a paired solar and storage, the system must include like a minimum of 1 kilowatt DC of solar electric nameplate capacity for every 5 kilowatt hours of battery storage. But beyond that, there's no kind of requirement around the islandable.
Okay, great. Well, I want to go back to the presenters from Maryland for a moment, because we're talking about duration of islanding for resilient systems, and I noted that you have a requirement of a 50% probability of 3 days of continuous islanded operations, which is an interesting. I've seen programs that require a certain number of days. I've never seen the probability before. Can you explain a little bit about, and you said people are having trouble figuring this out. So how do you calculate this, and what's the sort of rationale for requiring a 50% probability? What does that mean really in terms of how these things actually are designed?
David, you're on mute.
There we go. People aren't having a problem with doing the calculation. They're having a problem figuring out how much energy they need. In other words, whether they need 13 kilowatts for 8 hours a day and 5 kilowatts for another 6 hours a day or whatever. That's where their problem tends to be. Once we have the load profile, you can just put it into solarresilient.org and it will produce an answer. Now, having said that, what solarresilient.org does is it takes a look at databases from National Renewable Energy Laboratory for your region, and will, I think it's for your region. If not, it just uses the typical meteorological year, and it runs through that year with various starting points, like 8,760 starting points, and it determines how much energy is required in order to ensure that at least half of that will give you 3 days of energy storage. So it's actually using the NREL databases. So obviously, if you get 3 very, very cloudy, rainy, snowy, icy days in a row, you may not make it. But we know that at least on 50% of the days, we know that starting, if you had an energy loss at that time, you would make it.
Okay, thank you. And one more question for you guys. How much, I see that on the resiliency hubs, you're saying that you can have fossil backup generators. Is there a requirement for what percentage of the overall system capacity has to be renewable and storage versus how much can be, I'm assuming these are legacy or existing fossil generators?
For the Resiliency Hub program, there is no requirement per se, but the intention and direction is that the system be solar plus storage, and that the diesel be used as a backup / emergency generator only. Having said that, there are a couple of cases where the diesel may be required, and that is caused by the Maryland Historical Trust limiting the visibility of certain solar systems. So for example, we had a system that is being contemplated in inner city Baltimore on the side of a very historic church. The Maryland Historical Trust would not allow that, properly so. So the only area we could use was the flat roof on top of the social hall and school. That was insufficient to provide the energy for the Resiliency Hub. This was in a area where the average mean annual income was $15,000 a year. So we really did want to have a Resiliency Hub there. So that was a case where having an emergency diesel generator would almost be required in order to let that Resiliency Hub work. I just couldn't pay for it.
Got it. Thank you. That's really interesting. And now I want to I have one more question now for the Oregon presenters. The solar and storage in numerous states, solar and storage programs have become quite popular, but there always seems to be a question that arises as to how you deal with people who are net metering their solar, and then you're adding a battery behind the meter, and how does the utility ensure that whatever is coming back through that meter and is going to receive net metering credit is solar generated? In other words, not a result of charging the battery from the grid and then discharging it back out through the meter, which doesn't usually make any economic sense to do, but the utilities are required to have some assurance or provide some assurance that net metering is not being misapplied. So, and I don't even know whether that's an issue in Oregon. I've just thought I would ask because it seems to come up in various places across the country.
Right. I don't have a direct answer, but I'll try what we are doing. When the contractor, we left all the technical sides of this to the contracting community, who are the applicants on behalf of homeowners to us. So they verify these technology details. At the end of the project, the homeowner needs to do a self-attestation that it's connected and they are following what as per contract, all those obligations. So that is the only level of any verification that currently we are doing. Beyond that, it's a good question. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Is net metering possible in most of Oregon? I mean, can people do that?
It's interconnection. They do that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So presumably the utilities are somehow assuring themselves that it's being done properly and nobody's gaming the system. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, I have no further questions coming in, and I think we've covered everything. So we'll give everybody 10 minutes back. Thank you again for your time and for presenting the information. These are both excellent programs. Congratulations on the SLICE Awards. And Anna, do you have any upcoming webinars to promote here?
Yes, we absolutely do. We have one coming up next Thursday, Environmental Justice Strategies for Hydrogen Opposition. And then we also have one the following day, next Friday, December 16th. That one, Todd will be coming back as a moderator and I will be hosting again. It's new federal money for energy storage, the Inflation Reduction Act, have an all-star cast of folks coming from different DOE offices tuning in and sharing their expertise in the IRA next Friday. So hope you all can join us for one or both of those webinars. Some others are in the works, so make sure to go to our website, cesa.org/webinars, to stay adrift of all upcoming webinars and to RSVP to ones that are interest you. So again, thank you, Todd. Thank you to our wonderful speakers today for sharing about their programs, their award-winning programs from our SLICE Awards. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.